Stradivarius and Guarnerius knew that they were creating works of art. Every master does. From the time of Andrea Amati and Gaspar da Salo, the violin has been recognized as a work of art. And at the same time, the instrument whose voice is closest to our own. Paganini embraced this and went so far as to take bets while standing next to an opera singer behind a curtain, challenging the audience to choose who or what was singing, his Guarnerius or the opera singer. And the similarities, especially to the human form, don't stop there. This series of videos will be in no particular order. This is simply where I'm at on my next violin, because above all else, I am a violin maker. And each point of art in a master instrument, no matter how subtle, can and does influence the entire picture. If you truly want to know the secret of Stradivari's varnish, you must have all of the ingredients. One of the little-known attributes of master violins, and a point of authentication by connoisseurs, is a characteristic so subtle that you usually can't confirm it by just looking at photographs or by taking a few measurements. Though, once you know what you're looking for, you can begin to see it in Roger Hardgrave's measurements in the Peter BIDDULPH book about Guarnerius, and even though there are less measurements, definitely in Charles Bair's book, because Stradivarius was so much more consistent. Yet, even in person, with a fine Stradivarius, you have to know what you're looking for, and from just the right angle, because not only do the ribs of an original Amati, Stradivarius and Guarnerius taper smaller from the bottom to the top, the joint between the back and the ribs is purposely curved, ever so slightly, and with just a little extra curve at the top. This curve is tiny when compared to the back and ribs of a double bass. Yet it's enough to remind our subconscious of the beautiful, natural, human form. From an architect's point of view, it's like looking at the Parthenon. At first glance, the structure appears to be an old, yet impressive stone building with pillars. Yet, the more you look, the more wonderful it becomes. Keep looking, and you'll discover that it really is more beautiful than it ought to be, especially for the condition that it's in. And there is a reason. Unlike ordinary buildings, the Parthenon was made by three masters as a work of art, and it almost doesn't have a straight line in or on it. Even the pillars with their tapered sides were made convex or curved in order to breathe life and strength into what would otherwise be a plain, rigid form. The magical part of this exercise is that once you notice these features, it's impossible to ever look at buildings the same. And so it is with fine violins. Nothing is by chance. The masters meant everything that they put into their instruments, and once you get a taste for it, nothing is the same. But a word of caution. Don't discard your $1 million Stradivarius or Guarnerius just because the back doesn't taper and curve like it once did. It's usually because the instrument has been pulled apart and repaired so many times, or in some cases, pieces brought together from different instruments. These can still be wonderful instruments when restored. Yet, once you start looking at the entire picture, it does begin to discredit the myth that everything on a fine violin gets better with age. The one saving grace is that the backs of violins rarely do get removed in order to make repairs. Usually, removing the belly is more than enough. This taper of the ribs and curve of the back also helps to add to the sweetness of the tone and helping keep the wolves away. Scientifically speaking, it helps to prevent parallel plates from producing unwanted resonant nodes in the air between them. I know. This curve of the back is added to an instrument by using a gluing fixture like this that allows the back and the ribs to be glued evenly all the way around, all at once. I found a simple drawing and description of it in a manuscript dated 1694, and have used this type of fixture ever since for all of my violins, violas, and cellos. After the back and ribs are removed, they are allowed to relax for 2 days while resting on the bass side, so that the curve is ever so slightly more on the treble side, which is the most noticeable on Niccolo Amati's violins. After the 2 days are over, the back and ribs will curve and take on what is traditionally referred to as their natural form. This phenomenon can happen to a certain degree while using screw clamps, which Guarneri experimented with on a couple instruments for different effects. Yet the results with screw clamps are never as consistent, or to the connoisseur as elegant and beautiful as a fine Stradivarius. The ends of the ribs are then leveled with slightly more material being taken from the upper block than the lower one. And instead of planes and scrapers, the ribs were usually leveled, believe it or not, with sandpaper and or other types of abrasive papers and skins placed on a sheet of glass or marble. And yes, to dispel yet one more myth, even though the Cremonese masters loved their planes and scrapers just as much as I do, they did have abrasive papers. One of the biggest steps in learning the secrets of the masters is not to limit yourself because of assumptions. That way, you're free to learn exactly which tool or which material really is the best for a particular operation. The old masters took advantage of every technology they could. And never forget that Antonio Stradivari was very wealthy. So wealthy, in fact, that the saying on the streets throughout Europe in the late 1600s and early 1700s was not to be as rich as the king, but to be as rich as Stradivarius.